Good evening, everyone. This weekend I went on a little adventure with my old friend Miguel, and I've returned, weathered and with stories to share. I don't know about you guys, but I've been experiencing a little bit of burnout with the Tekken 7 online ranked grind recently. I'm hoping Season 3 will shake up the meta with its balance changes and new characters, and so to prepare I wanted to kind of cleanse my palate and get back to basics, and for me that means playing Miguel. I want to play a lot of Miguel and Zafina in Season 3, and I want to focus more on pure fun than on like trying to achieve things necessarily. So I made a new user account on PS4 that I will use for Season 3, and I set myself a little challenge for the weekend, kind of like a mini game. I wanted to play only Miguel and get him from beginner to at least Fujin over the course of the weekend. I ended up having a lot of fun, and I also learned a lot about the character. I modified my combos, changed my Oki, and I honestly feel more comfortable with the character now than ever. I also played in the lower ranks for the first time in a long while, and I want to talk a little bit about that experience, but for variety's sake, and so it's not just me talking the whole video, I want to include a little bit of gameplay here. This is the last game I played, the Fujin promotion. It's not the best game ever played, it's not a very high rank, but it was a fun game with a cool opponent, and I think it at least highlights a couple of the things that Miguel is actually very good at. So let's have a look at that and then talk more when we get back.
Round 1. Fight. Perfect. Round 2. Fight. Round 3. Fight. Round 4. Fight.
And we're back. Before we talk about Miguel specifically, I just want to start by giving one big tip for people who are playing Tekken in the sort of green to red ranks right now. It's very broad, but it's something I was really noticing when I was going through those ranks, and once I tried to sort of keep it in mind, it actually helped to smooth out my grind and make it a lot quicker. And it's basically this: if you're one of those players where you actually want to become really good at Tekken and you watch videos on it and so on, then you're probably trying to learn Tekken by emulating the way it is being played at a high level, and you're trying to worry about the proper things such as patience, movement, reacting to your opponent's mistakes, block punishment, whiff punishment, and so on. And those are all very, very important things, and they are what is going to allow you to win at a high level. But when you're in the online grind and you're running into these very, very aggressive players who really want to party with big lows, knockdown stuff, snake edges, and a lot of throws. There's a lot of throw abuse in the lower ranks, I really felt. I think the sort of overarching theme to the things that they are trying to abuse is things that need to be dealt with on reaction quite quickly, and that need to be dealt with in specific ways. And if you're playing at a rank where most of your opponents aren't going to be fast or knowledgeable enough to deal with those things in the proper ways, then they become very, very abusable. So just as a simple example, think about what the giant swing is when you're dealing with somebody who's not going to duck it, not going to break it, and then not going to tech it. It essentially becomes a lightning fast, unblockable poke that does as much damage as an entire combo. It's crazy powerful in that context. And I think if that's what you're up against and you're trying to be very passive and you're looking at your opponent and you're sort of waiting for your turn, what happens a lot of the time is you end up getting steamrolled, because while you can become very, very good at blocking lows on reaction and breaking throws on reaction, nobody's good enough that they can do it 100% of the time. And if you're allowing your opponent to set the pace and apply all of these abusable moves, then you just open yourself up to all of these opportunities for them to run away with a lot of damage. And so I felt the superior way to deal with those matches was actually to try and match my opponent's pace and to match their aggression. And that doesn't mean that I think you should be like spammy and just use moves randomly or abuse, snake edges and so on. I think you should try and match their pace and their aggression, but then hopefully you do it a little bit more intelligently, and the way you can do that is with a superior understanding of frame data. Now I know a lot of new players don't like the concept of frame data because it feels a little bit mathy, not necessarily a lot of fun, but just as a super basic example, if I use this up forward one and I realize that my opponent does not know that he is at minus frames when that gets blocked, all I need to do, because I know he's going to swing because of how aggressive he is, I can just do that and then use a counter hit move, and I know I'm going to get a full combo. That's super basic, and every single character in the game, including Miguel, can create much more sophisticated and subtle frame traps than that. But if you do try and get that edge with a superior, understanding of at least your own character's frame data, then you can match their pace, but in the scramble, you're usually going to end up on top, and you can really get a lot of mileage out of specifically your fast counter hit moves. So maybe next time you're going to sit down for an online grind and you feel a little bit frustrated with a lack of progress, maybe spend the day in practice mode, open up RB Norway and try and see if you can find some new opportunities for some cool setups in the numbers, regarding your character. But with that out of the way, I want to move on to Miguel specifically. I really feel like I've learned a lot about the character this week, and my sort of view of him has changed a little bit. And I want to give you some of my tips and then talk a little bit of my hopes for Season 3. Now, the first thing I'm going to mention here, and it's a big tip for Miguel players, you might already be doing it, but I need to sort of backtrack on some of my own words here, because I made a video a long time ago now where I talked about controllers and how to hold them, kind of how to grip your stick, how to grip your controller. And I mentioned in that video that I'm not really a fan of using key bindings, binding multiple inputs to a single button on your controller. And the reason I'm not a fan of that, the reason I'm very careful with it, is I feel that Tekken is an extremely difficult game that requires a lot of practice and a lot of discipline, and so I don't want to feel like I'm taking shortcuts. If I'm doing an input and it's not coming out clean, I'd rather practice it for long enough that it does come out clean than, trying to find a workaround. But since then I've found a lot of examples where it can actually be very, very useful to use key bindings, and Miguel actually has one of those that I'm going to get to now. I recommend that you bind RKLK or 3+4 to one of your spare buttons, and the reason for that is that it's the input of manual Savage. And if we're going to talk a little bit about Savage, really the reason Miguel is not considered to be a very powerful character in the game is that he's really starved for range, famously, and then he's also kind of starved for safety. But he does have a couple of really long range, powerful and safe moves from his Savage stance. problem being that Savage stance isn't mobile, it's a stance you can only get into when you're standing still. And so something that I've been trying to do a lot, and I was hopefully doing it a bit in that clip that I showed you earlier, is when I'm moving around the stage, I'm trying to pop in and out of Savage every once in a while, and if I see an opportunity to apply a Savage move, I will jump on it, and if I don't, I'll do nothing. For example, if you're just popping into Savage and you identify a whiff from your opponent, then you can do that down for 2, and you're going to get a massive and powerful whiff punisher. But more importantly, this is really, in my opinion, it's sort of grown on me more and more. I think Miguel's most powerful move, bar none, I think the best move in his entire move list is Savage down back 3. I can't get over how important I think this move is right now. First of all, you can tell that the range is absolutely massive. I mean, everybody knows that this is a good low, but I think it's like such a pillar of his gameplay. So you can see that the range is massive, it's got good tracking, it's going to hit people on the ground, and you get massive guaranteed stuff on counter hit. So everything about this move is good, and they're almost never going to block it, provided that you're able to pop into Savage quite quickly and then do it right away. So it's extremely good. It's also, you know, the main low in your Savage mix-up. So being able to pop into Savage and applying this low from a range is a very, very important strategy. It keeps your opponent scared, and it also makes up for your sort of glaring lack of range that you have when you're not in Savage, you know, when you're working with stuff like this and your T-Rex arms and so on. The big downside of the Savage down back 3 is of course the fact that you have to be in Savage to be able to do it. If you could just do this, if this was like down back 3, it would be completely busted and easily one of the best lows in the game. And the reason that's very, very exciting is that one change that we've seen for Miguel, the one thing we know is going to happen to him in Season 3, is that we know he's going to get a new low that looks a lot like a version of this low that probably doesn't come out of Savage. So that's potentially extremely interesting and important for the character. It might be a massive, massive improvement to this character. My guess for that low, just looking at it, is that it's going to be his forward 4. I think it's going to be kind of similar to what Lars does with his forward 4-3. Kind of, you know, it comes out of a dash, it's got massive range, and then whether or not it is really good is going to depend on how fast it is, you know, how reactable it is, how bad it is on block, whether or not you get something on counter hit or not. But anything that can be described as a version of this hatched kick that doesn't necessarily come out of Savage is potentially a massive buff for the character, and so I have high hopes for Miguel improving in the new season. The other thing I want to talk about is that I've sort of modified the way I think about and do combos with the character. First of all, if we're going to talk about the while standing 2-4, the combo that I always used to do looked like this, and I still do this combo. I still like it because I get 57 damage, which is pretty good for that launcher, and I also get the opportunity for Savage Oki. But another sort of staple combo that evolved when I was not playing Miguel, you know, after Season 2 came out, is this combo right here. And this is another reason why I think Manual Savage can actually give you a lot of consistency and be useful. As you can see, this will give you 56 damage, which is quite good for this launcher. It's going to give you really reliable and long wall carry, and you can convert to the wall much easier, and I think that combo is really quite good. It becomes a lot less awkward when you have a Manual Savage button for this Savage up for 3 right here. And so that's another reason I think that might be a good idea to bind to a button. And then the other bread and butter modification that I've done is that the old classic for Miguel is that he ended his combos after a spin or a bound with a down forward 1 into that string right there. And you can do that currently in some of his bread and butters, but it felt a little bit inconsistent to me, which is why I wasn't doing it. But if you just practice it a little bit, it turns out that it's actually really quite easy, and it makes a big difference because you get a little bit more damage, but it also makes the ender of your combos convertible, and you get really, really good sort of range when you want to make long wall carry. So for example, with the hop kick, you would do something like this. and then you could end with the 4-4-2-2 instead, and you would get massive carry, and you get 65 damage, whereas the combos I usually do off my hop kick, I'd get 62 to 64. That's a small difference in damage, but I think it's significant enough that it matters. So that's another modification that I've done. The final change that I've done to my combos is that I'm using 1-2-1+2 as much more of a staple when I'm at the wall. So if I splat here, I might not do the normal wall combo, I might just do that. And the reason that's really cool is 1 down forward 1 savage 2 is still optimal damage for big targets, but it's inconsistent sometimes, especially on female characters. On some of them it will almost never connect the way it's supposed to, whereas this 1-2-1+2 here is very reliable. And so whenever I feel like I just want to shore up my damage and really get something reliable at the wall, I'm using that, and it's never let me down so far. I really like it. I talked a little bit about modifying my Oki, and one of the unfortunate nerves that Miguel caught in Season 2 is that this move, which he used for resets at the wall, became nerfed, and it was brought up to -15, meaning it's launch punishable on block. The way you would use this is you would splat somebody, spike them at the wall, and then use this, and if they get up crouching, you'd get a reset. If they stayed on the ground, it still hits, so it was very good. But after it became launch punishable, the usability sort of disappeared, and so what do you hunt them on the ground with now instead? And I think, this for the low, of course, but then if you want a big mid here, I was watching Sephi Black, the famously strong Miguel tournament player, and he applies a lot of down back too, and I've really come to like that move, specifically for the Oki and the attempted reset at the wall. The downside is, of course, that this move will not necessarily hit them if they're just staying on the ground, but it has a great hitbox, it will wall splat, and it is safe at -9, so it's a very good move for that. And so this is kind of the main mid that I used for Oki setups, and it made a big difference. Next, I just want to talk a little bit about down forward 1 and how it's not the amazing and important move that I think a lot of Miguel players make it out to be. This used to be like the main staple for Miguel and one of the best mid pokes in the game. It used to have superior frame data, but I think in this version of the game it is short ranged, and it's just not as good as some other versions of the same move in the game. For example, Katarina's down forward 1 is much better than this. It has great range and a better hitbox. This is inconsistent for combos. You're still going to use it for accessing Savage and so on, but I think another really good staple that I had been neglecting that I'm using a lot more now is the down forward 3 and the down forward 3-2. We knew that this was a good string, but I really underestimated just how useful it is, because again, Miguel is starved for range and he's starved for safety, and this string has both. The range on this mid poke is massive. It impacts slower than the down forward one, of course, but it sort of makes up for it because of the range, and then the fact that you can stick this on the opponent, get a nice chunk of damage if it hits, but then be completely safe if it gets blocked. It's sort of Miguel's weakest area. This is the move that stands out as a compensation for a lot of his glaring faults, and I think it's amazing, and I'm using it a lot more now. It's a great move for just a mid option when you're applying a mix-up and so on, when you're not necessarily doing it from Savage, because then you're probably working with stuff like the Savage up forward 3. The last move I want to talk about is down 3. I think this low poke it looks really slow, but I think it's actually amazing, because if you look at Miguel's other famously good low pokes like the down back 3 and down back 4, these moves do not have high crush, whereas this down 3 does. The down 3 also has a lot of really great range, and again, you want range with Miguel because it's an area where he struggles. And so while this might look really slow, people very rarely block this actually, and you get away with it most of the time, and it can sort of allow you to stay out of their optimal range and still harass them in the legs. And it honestly really reminds me of down back 3 from Elisa, not Elisa the vampire, but Elisa the robot, and that is famously one of the best low pokes and one of the most staple moves of that character. So anything that reminds you or sort of feels like that move probably has a lot of serious usage about it. So those are just some of the insights I wanted to share about Miguel that I've sort of had when I played him over this last week. And really what I want now more than anything is just patch notes for this character for Season 3, because I think he's going to get better, and I'm already excited about and happy about the way he is right now. But I think he's going to get even better. I really want to know about that low. Is he going to finally get that jab range so that this mix-up that he has built into his jab stream becomes more reliable after a punish? That would be pretty big for him in my opinion. Or are they going to give him some range on the 2-1? That would be really important as well. I'm very, very excited. I have a lot of hopes for this character, and right now I feel like I want to kind of commit, I do a lot of character hopping, but in the new season I think I'm going to try and commit to like Miguel and a lot of Zafina, and I'm going to try and, I think the moral of the story with this whole little experiment of mine is that sometimes when you're frustrated with your favorite character and you feel like you're not making progress, the answer might not be to play something else. The answer might just be to play that character a whole lot more and try and gain, some new perspective. Hopefully this was interesting enough and you enjoyed it. It's mainly obviously for Miguel players, but I know I have quite a few of those who follow this channel. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye for now.